Democratic Congressman from California, Jimmy Panetta. He spent most of last week overseas with a bipartisan delegation, visiting a number of NATO countries, including Poland, and he did symbolically cross the border into Ukraine. Congressman Panetta, it's always good to have a member of the Panetta family on the show. So good to talk with you.
Thanks, Chuck. Good to be here.
Let me start with what you saw and the importance of seeing and hearing stories versus watching them on TV. Tell me the stories you heard of Russian aggression from Ukrainian refugees that you spoke with.
Yeah, that was obviously the most heartfelt part of the trip, was going to the border, crossing into Ukraine, but then also going to the refugee centers there just off the border in Poland, and hearing from the refugees the trauma, the atrocities, and every other horror that people are seeing on TV that they are witnessing in person, and what's driving them out of their homes into the, and I have to say, the welcoming arms of Poland. You don't understand what Poland has taken on, and they really are a linchpin when it comes to accepting these refugees, but more importantly, integrating them into their society. It was funny, when I got back, a lot of people asked, well, did you go to the refugee camps? Did you go to the tents? Did you see tents? None of that. There's no tents. There's no refugee camps. There's refugee centers, temporary centers. But these Poles have gone to the border and taken them into their homes, and basically are doing a huge first step in trying to integrate them into their society, which I think is very commendable. Refugees coming in and also armaments going out all through Poland into Ukraine. So definitely, as I say, Poland is the linchpin when it comes to this Ukrainian war that we're dealing with.
Hearing the stories, seeing some of this stuff more firsthand, has your views on what NATO and the United States should be doing here at all changed?
No, it's always been the same. We need to do more, and we need to continue to do more. And that was the purpose of our trip, to let our NATO partners know that we are, Democrats and Republicans on that bipartisan trip, are in support of the efforts to support the Ukrainian people, to bleed the Russian government of its resources to wage this unjustified and unprovoked war, and to reassure our NATO allies that we stand with them in this effort. And I do believe that that was that message that when we left each of our meetings, it was clear by the statements that were made by the government officials in Poland, in Denmark, in Germany. They couldn't tell who was Republican or who was Democrat in those meetings. They just knew that we were Americans standing firm with our Ukrainian partners, with our NATO partners, to make sure that we continue to deliver punches to Vladimir Putin.
Tell me about the meeting with Germany and whether you get the sense that they are, how willing are they to essentially punish themselves short term to get the outcome that the Western world is looking for?
Yeah, a good question, Chuck. Look, I think it goes back to the February 27th speech by Chancellor Stolz, the Zeitenwende speech, where he basically admitted their energy dependence on Russia. But at the same time, he took some crucial steps to become what they call him the crisis chancellor now in Germany, to basically show their support for the Ukrainians, and that they're upping their 2% of the GDP to their military spending, making Germany the #3 country in the world on spending on their military. They also then made that change to providing armaments to Ukraine, a policy that they basically went against, a tradition that they didn't do, and now they're doing that. And then 3, the admission that 50% of their natural gas comes from Russia. And so it'd be very difficult to cut that off right away. Now, look, they're still going to close their nuclear plants by the end of this year. They're still going to have to wean, it's going to take a long time to wean themselves off the fossil fuels from Russia. But at the same time, they're developing LNG terminals, and they're also developing storage facilities for natural gas so that they can import them from other countries. So there was an admission there. But there are also steps being taken by the German government, especially by Chancellor Stolz, to basically understand that, we got to do more. They're doing more. And it was good to meet with the chancellor and to basically talk with him about this and acknowledge more steps that we have to take together.
If the Russians end up essentially being able to say they have liberated or taken away from Ukraine the Donbas region completely. And even though Ukraine's sovereignty would be mostly protected, can we really sit here and say this was a success by the West if Russia takes this bite out of Ukraine again?
And these are the questions that are being raised right now. Obviously, you have this full frontal assault in the eastern region by the Russian military that we're witnessing over these last few hours. This brutish attack on Mariupol and basically trying to create that arc of occupation in that eastern region. That combined with the many atrocities that are being committed by the Russian military at the behest of Vladimir Putin, the key thing is what we all have to deal with. How are we going to trust them going forward? What is basically the strategy right now in dealing with some sort of a concession by Russia, by Vladimir Putin saying, okay, we're done now. We have the eastern region. Yeah. We don't want any more. Are you kidding me? There's going to be basically a lack of trust there that I think is going to be pervasive in any sort of future dealings with Russia at this point. And so I do not think we could declare it a win. I do believe that's why now we need to continue to stock and supply armaments to the Ukrainian military, to the Ukrainians, so that they can continue to wage this defense of their country, of their freedoms going forward.
Yeah. But Congressman, it feels like a policy that we're trying to arm Ukraine to make sure they have a stalemate. I cannot, and you probably heard my last question to Mike McFaul, neither Jake Sullivan or Ron Klain in the last 10 days, in direct questioning from me, will say our strategy is for Ukraine to win this war, period.
It's interesting. And I don't normally reveal this, but since you started off the conversation with this, the first question my father asked me when I got home was, well, what's the strategy? And that was something that really didn't necessarily come up, to be honest with you, in our discussions, and based on probably the reasons why what you're saying. But look, I think despite that, I do believe there needs to be more done for a counteroffensive by the Ukrainians at this point to continue to punch Vladimir Putin and the Russian military in the face. As difficult as it may be, the fact is that the Russians have surrounded Mariupol. They've seized it, but they haven't controlled it. And it's been 50-plus days for them to do that, just one town. And therefore demonstrates the thing that Vladimir Putin underestimated, and that's the will of the Ukrainian people. And therefore, we need to do everything we can to fulfill that will and fulfill the fight of the Ukrainian people so that they get to a position where they have their freedom throughout Ukraine.
Congressman Panetta, I think that's what we're all trying to wonder. Does the West have the same will as these Ukrainians are showing? Anyway, Congressman, good to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck.